Hello and welcome to my first video on bike maintenance. What I'm going to cover in this video is how to change the brake fluid on the rear brake for a Ducati Monster SP. I've got the bike set up on the side stand as it leans the bike nicely in the right direction, and that gives me plenty of easy access to the brake caliper on the rear wheel, which you can see now. So this has not been done before on this bike. This is the first time. So the first thing I'm going to do is just crack off of these bolts on the caliper. One, two. I'm going to leave the caliper in place while I take these clips off of the rear speed sensor because that cable is going to hold the caliper where I don't want it to be. So just twisting that off, that comes away pretty easily, and this one should also come away fairly easy. There you go, the cable's nice and loose. So that means that when I take the caliper off, it's not going to be hanging on this cable and damaging anything in there. I will say at this point I don't have a tripod, so we might see some breaks in the video while I reset the camera up so you can see what's going on. But this is going to be a pretty simple process. So now I've got those bolts loosened, I can just pull those out. Sorry, get out of the way of the camera. There's one. Put that in the tray there. This one as well. Go there. And that caliper should pull off nice and easily. There we go. He's pretty free, so I'll get a couple of blocks, put under there. I can now see caliper sitting on some blocks. The important part of this is to make this bleed point here the highest point. So I may have to play around with the blocks in a second to try and get that to a better position, because we want the air to rise, and when we bleed it, all the air should come out the highest point, which will be here in this part. Now, the next thing I'm going to do, if I can position this, I need to get in and put a screwdriver into between the brake pads to be able to push those apart. That's pretty simple. I've got a flat bladed screwdriver, it's quite a broad one, so I'm not going to damage the pads. And all I'm doing is just teasing them apart. And what that's doing is pushing the fluid. Let me show you where the fluid is at the moment. You can see the fluid is just under the max. As I push these pads back, that fluid is going to be pushed back into that master cylinder. This is all old fluid in the brake system at the moment. So just twisting, pushing those pads back. And you'll feel when they're fully back. And what we're doing that for is to remove as much of the brake fluid from the caliper, the old fluid, as possible, and push it up into that master cylinder. So I'll put a bar in between the brake pads, if I can fit one in. So that just sits in there, and that's where when I step on the brake, it won't close the pads right up and keeps the pistons fully pushed home. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the cap. You see, there should be full of fluid in there, so I might need to get a rag around there while I remove the cap. Let me just do that. Right, I've got my rag set up, wrapped around the master cylinder there. So the reason I do that is because brake fluid is quite corrosive to paint. We don't really want any spilling onto the springing arm, and given that I've just pushed that fluid back in there, this could be a little foot more full than we want. So undo that, and the rag will catch any fluid that wants to fall out. So there's a little bit in there, too much. And you've got that seal as well, so it's quite wet. So now we've got a ton of brake fluid in the master cylinder. So the next thing what we're going to do is I'm going to get a bottle, and we're going to get a syringe, and we're going to suck that fluid out, because this is all old fluid. So in goes the syringe. Not any of that in there. Okay, there's the old fluid. It goes into my jar. Because I don't need any of that anymore. I can sit on that. Right, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the bleed system on the rear caliper. Right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the little rubber cap here, if I can. There we go, there's where the fluid's going to come out. I'm going to refill this reservoir with some new Motul 5.1. It's brand new, bought that the other day. And then I'm going to connect this bleed tube and bottle to there. So this is a silicone tube. Silicone doesn't get affected by brake fluid. And the nut on this bleed nipple is an 11mm. Probably the least used spanner in my toolbox, but now it's got a use, so it must be very happy. Okay, it's a little tricky to do holding the camera, so I've just positioned the camera on the rear, but I'm pushing down on the brake pad, applying some force. When I pull the spanner, hopefully we see a little bit of fluid coming out. You see that? I can see. So you can see there's a little bit of fluid moving in the tube just past the tire. Now, holding the brake down with the pressure on, I'm going to shut the valve by tightening the screw, just so. Again, difficult, one hand, not hit the camera. Once I've done that, I can release the brake. That's going to pull fluid from the master cylinder that I just put in, that fresh fluid. That's going to pull that in. And then when I pump again, it's going to push a bit more fluid in. So it's a case of constantly pushing the pedal down. There we go. Still got plenty of pressure. We're never going to lose pressure with this. Pump down. So pull push the new fluid through the hose, through here, into the caliper, out of the bleed nipple, through the hose, into the bottle, sitting here. And I've got to do that a few times, and I may see this colour change, although this fluid isn't really that old. But service interval says that we should change it, so that's what we're going to do. The only critical thing here is two critical things. Don't let go of the brake pressure until the spanner has tightened the nut, and don't let that run out of fuel. Don't let that run out of fluid. If that runs out of fluid, you'll suck air into the system, and then you're in for a whole heap of drama. Once again, See the fluid going down when I release the pedal. Put a bit more fluid in the master cylinder up here. A little bit more up. So that is 2 runs through of the brake system. I've done 3 master cylinder refills, 2 master cylinder refills, so 3 master cylinders have gone through. We are pretty much done. That's it. It's now just a case of refitting all of that caliper back on, put the cap back on as well. So I'll just get to doing that. These are torqued to 25 Newton meters. So I'll just set up the torque wrench. That's it. Clips back on. And then I need to be careful because the brake pads were pushed back. So when I push the brake down and push the pads against the disc again, we might lose some of this fluid as I push the pads in. So I need to watch that level doesn't drop too far and start sucking air in. All right, now I've found firmness in the pedal. so it's quite firm, and I'm still on the minimum. So all I need to do now is just top that back up, put some more in. All right, so I just added a little bit more fluid into there. I've got the cap seal that goes in first. There we go. Now this cap has a little airway on the top, so as the as the brake pads get thinner and the fluid goes down, it doesn't create a vacuum. So but it stops the fluid coming out in case there's a tip over. So these are clean, and then I'll just put the cap back on. So, got a solid brake pad still. We've had no risk really of getting air in the system. The biggest risk, as I said before, is letting this drain to zero. That's what you need to watch really. And once you're done, there you go, all sorted. Front brakes, they'll be next. They'll follow exactly the same pattern, but we'll do those in another video. Thanks for watching.